It was Monday morning, 8:47 a.m. I grabbed my coffee and scanned my badge through the turnstile. It was the final quarter of the year, and I was closing in on my 12th year at the company. My name is Elena Morrison. I'm 42 years old, and up. Until that morning, I was a senior clinical data analyst at Lifewell Pharmaceuticals, the woman behind dozens of drug applications and trial reports across the globe. That day, something felt off. The hallway was quieter than usual. People weren't talking, they weren't laughing. They weren't even making eye contact. No one said anything. But somehow, it felt like everyone knew something. And then it happened. A notification popped up on my internal calendar. No warning, no prior email. 9:30 m. Meeting with CEO and HR, floor 19, the executive level, and that meeting? That was the first time in my entire career that I had a calendar invite show up without anyone telling me in advance. I set my coffee down, closed my notes, and walked toward the elevator, trying to ignore the knot building in my chest. As the doors opened on floor 19, two people were already waiting: Martin Roth, head of HR, and our CEO, Daniel Kessler. Daniel didn't stand. He didn't reach out to shake my hand. He didn't even look up. He opened a folder and spoke in a flat, emotionless voice. "Elena, our company is entering a restructuring phase. We've decided to outsource our reporting systems. As a result, your current role no longer aligns with our future needs." In that moment, everything slowed down. Daniel's voice blurred into static. 12 years. Dozens of patents. 5 FDA approvals. And now, a career ended in 3 sentences. Martin handed me an envelope. A voluntary departure package, they called it. He added quietly, "Today will be your last day. Please return your badge, laptop, and documents before you leave. No thank you. No goodbye. Not even a forced apology. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't ask why. I just nodded once, turned, and left. As I walked back through the office, no one said a word, but the silence said everything. It took me nearly 20 minutes to pack up my things, not because I had too much, but because with every item I touched, I fell into a memory. I opened my bottom drawer. There it was, a keychain I got at an FDA seminar in Tokyo, still intact. Right next to it, a prototype box of the first antidepressant we released back in 2015. It wasn't even the commercial version. It was pre-production, early stage, the kind of thing most people throw out. I never did. I was 30 when I first joined Lifewell. Newly divorced. My daughter Emma was 5. My life felt broken. But Lifewell didn't just give me a job. It gave me a second start. My first supervisor, Dr. Linton, once told me something that stuck in my head ever since. "The pharmaceutical industry sells hope, Elena, but if the data is flawed, that hope is poison." So for 12 years, I never rounded up a number. I never adjusted a percentage to look better. If a drug was approved under my watch, it was because the data was clean. The company grew, and I grew with it. We opened new facilities, entered new countries, gained new investors. But no matter how fast things moved, whenever something went wrong, they called me. In 2018, during a tuberculosis vaccine trial in Africa, the data wasn't lining up. A junior analyst had filed the wrong chart. Panic spread across the leadership team. Nobody could figure it out. Then they called me. I worked 3 days straight, barely slept. I rebuilt the dataset, filtered the trials manually, and by the end, I didn't just salvage the data, I saved the $48 million licensing deal that depended on it. But I never got a promotion. I never got a spotlight, because I wasn't the face of the company. I was the quiet woman keeping it alive behind the scenes. That spotlight? That always belonged to people like Daniel, people with MBAs, buzzwords, and boardroom charisma, the ones who pitched big ideas, without ever touching a dataset. The morning I got fired, none of that was mentioned. No one brought up the crises I solved. No one asked about the inconsistencies I'd flagged in recent data. But I knew. I knew exactly why they pushed me out. Because 3 weeks earlier, during an internal audit, something caught my eye. A drug called Nouvelle-X, one that hadn't even finished its phase 3 trials, had somehow already been approved for release in Europe. That wasn't just premature. That was impossible. Because the trial status still showed pending on my dashboard. I didn't report it. I didn't raise hell. But I couldn't let it go, either. That evening, I checked to see if I still had access to export the files. And I did. So I backed them up. Not for revenge, not for curiosity, for protection. As I left the office that day, no one said a word. But deep down, they all knew it. Elena knows something. And they were right. I hadn't said anything. Not yet, but I had something to say. When I got home, it was 11:52 a.m. Normally, I'd still be staring at a dashboard full of data sets and approvals, but today, I was standing in my kitchen, jobless, and strangely, not empty. My daughter Emma was working on her laptop at the counter. She looked up when I walked in, met my eyes, but didn't ask a thing. I didn't offer anything either. Telling your child you were fired is the kind of sentence no kid knows how to respond to. I walked into my room, didn't close the door, but emotionally, I shut out everything else. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a plain black USB drive. Unmarked, untagged. I'd kept it for years under one rule only: use only if it's ever necessary. And now, it was. The drive contained a backup of the Nouvelle-X Phase 3 trial data. But what was inside was more disturbing than I'd let myself admit. The participant IDs didn't match the dosage records. Some patients were duplicated across trial groups. Dates were altered, and entire sections of adverse event reports were missing. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Sat down on my bed. No coffee this time, just a kind of trembling in my chest that wasn't fear. It was fury. They trusted me for 12 years, but I never worked for their image. I worked for integrity, for safety. Because if you're going to release something that rewires people's brains, you better be damn sure the data behind it is honest. And this wasn't. Someone had signed off on fake results. Someone had submitted a drug for market approval using doctored science. And they thought I wouldn't notice. I hadn't told anyone. Not the press, not the FDA, not even a lawyer. Not yet. Because first, I needed to see if I still had one thing: a voice inside the company, and that meant finding out if anyone on the inside still had a conscience. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the flash drive like it was radioactive, because I knew, the second I used it, everything would change. I wrote a single line in my notebook. This isn't about going back. This is about setting something right. I closed the notebook. I wasn't part of the system anymore, but maybe that was exactly why I could finally hold it accountable. Tuesday morning, 8:04 a.m. I wasn't holding coffee, I was holding my notebook. For the first time in days, I didn't open my laptop. I didn't check the news. I didn't even scroll LinkedIn. I sat still and asked myself a simple question. Is there anyone left on the inside I can still trust? Only one name came to mind: Sienna Blake, a quiet, razor-sharp data scientist who had joined 2 years ago. She rarely talked during meetings, but she always looked like she was thinking 10 steps ahead. I didn't call her. This needed to be subtle. Quiet, a message, not a conversation. Does Nouvelle-X Phase 3 still exist in the system? Can you check post-John 15 data logs? Something doesn't look right. 3 minutes later, she replied with a single word: noticed. My heart rate jumped. Someone else saw it. Someone else knew. I wasn't alone. 12 a.m. I tried logging into my old LifeWell email out of pure habit. Access denied, obviously. But 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Seconds later, I got an email on my personal account from Martin Roth, head of HR subject. Legal reminder regarding confidential data. Elena, there have been attempts to access internal company files. We remind you of your obligations under our confidentiality policy. Legal action may be pursued if necessary. I smiled. Because here's the truth. I never signed their separation agreement. They gave it to me. I left it on the table. They were bluffing, and while they were trying to scare me off, they had no idea what I actually had in my hands. At 1:45 p.m., Sienna messaged again. Nouvelle X files were locked out today, labeled as a system maintenance update. All access restricted, except sea level. Then another message. This usually means one thing. They're trying to hide something. Everyone's tense. Daniel and the CFO had a closed-door meeting this morning. If they call me in, I'll stay quiet. But if it gets worse, I'll speak. That was all I needed to know. It had started. This wasn't about me anymore. The walls were cracking from the inside. Later that night, I pulled out the USB again, but instead of just staring at it, I made a move. I duplicated the files onto 3 new drives. One went into my personal lockbox. One I tucked inside a stack of old music CDs in Emma's closet. And the third, I shipped it to a former colleague I deeply trusted. No explanation, just a note. If anything happens to me, give this to a journalist. It wasn't drama, it was protection, because I knew exactly what kind of company I was dealing with, and I wasn't about to be naive. They thought I was gone, that I was out of reach. But here's the truth. I wasn't inside their system anymore. But I had never been easier to hear. Wednesday morning, I sat at my desk. No alarms, no commute, no schedule, just silence. And the weight of what I knew, and I was ready to move, but I wasn't going to drop everything at once, because if you unload the truth too fast, they dismiss you as bitter, desperate, unhinged. But if you dose it right, you become a threat they can't afford to ignore, so I opened a new email. To Daniel Kessler, CEO subject, Nouvelle X, Phase 3, Data Inconsistencies, Preliminary Findings for Review. The language? Professional, measured, non-accusatory. Daniel. During my final week, I noticed several anomalies in Nouvelle Phase 3 datasets, duplicated patient IDs, repeated dosage entries, and signs of manual overrides. While it may be human error, the scale suggests systemic issues. Out of respect for the company and the integrity of its work, I thought it important to raise this to executive attention. No attachments, no threats, just a breadcrumb. I hit send. At 11:18 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, I got a message from Martin Roth, head of HR. We've reviewed your email. A task force would like to meet with you to clarify the situation. Are you available today or tomorrow? That was fast. Too fast. Which meant only one thing. I'd hit a nerve. At 1:45 p.m., Sienna messaged again. Access to all Nouvelle X folders has been suspended. Full lockdown. Admin-level clearance only. This never happens unless they're in full panic mode. Then she added, Kessler and Wilburn, CFO, had a shouting match behind closed doors. People are whispering. Everyone's walking on eggshells. I closed my eyes. The temperature had changed. The storm was brewing. And for once, I was the one pulling the strings. At 4:00 p.m., I drafted a second email. This time, addressed to LifeWell's compliance department, the people who actually read the fine print. It's possible that prior internal flags regarding data integrity were overlooked. If these inconsistencies in Nouvelle X are confirmed, they could pose a legal and ethical risk to the company. I recommend initiating an independent audit before any regulatory review. I signed it with my full title, Elena Morrison, former senior clinical data analyst. 1 hour later, I received an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, labeled as a voluntary settlement offer for past contributions. Inside, a small payout and a binding clause. No discussions about Nouvelle X or any LifeWell data after employment. In other words, hush money. I didn't sign. I didn't even reply. Instead, I copied all Phase 3 screenshots, database logs, and time-stamped. Audit trails to 3 separate USB drives, each encrypted and marked. One went into my safe, another into a fireproof lockbox in my car, and the third? I kept by my bed. I didn't need drama. I needed insurance. That night, I wrote one more line in my notebook. They can't shut me down if they don't know where the sound is coming from. And by the time the sun rose, Lifewell wouldn't know who was listening or what I was about to say. Thursday morning. 17. Unread messages lit up my phone. 8 from unknown numbers. 3 from old colleagues I hadn't spoken to in months. And the rest? Just one word, over and over again. Leaked. It took me a moment to understand. Then I opened my email, and there it was. The exact message I had sent Daniel, the one about the Nouvelle X data inconsistencies, was now posted anonymously on Lifewell's internal message board. But this wasn't a copy. It was the original. Word for word, that email was only ever in my sent folder, which meant 2 things. Someone inside still had access to my old account. Someone wanted the rest of the company to see what I saw. And now, there was no going back. At 3:12 p.m., Sienna messaged me. Something's happening. The CFO left his office with legal emergency meeting with Daniel just started, and someone from compliance asked to review your old email logs. They weren't trying to fix it, they were trying to contain it, but they were too late, because now everyone inside Lifewell was whispering one thing. Elena knew. Later that day, a call came in from Amanda Wells, Director of Compliance and Ethics at Lifewell. I answered. Elena, I hope you're doing well. We're reaching out because we've received some internal questions about your data files. We're hoping to clarify a few points, and ideally work together to resolve any misunderstandings. Her voice was tight, cautious. I didn't speak for a few seconds. Then, Amanda, if the company had cared about clarity, they would have asked me before deleting evidence. Silence. We're trying to do the right thing here. Are you? Because, from what I can see, you're trying to control a leak, not investigate the truth. I hung up, then opened my computer, and got to work. That afternoon, I compiled everything. 14 pages, clean, organized, bulletproof. Duplicate patient IDs, timestamp mismatches, missing adverse event reports, email evidence suggesting manipulation, internal memos where marketing pushed for pre-FDA release, and a subject line that said it all. Nouvelle X Phase 3, full internal review request. Didn't send it to Daniel. Not HR, not even legal. I sent it directly to Lifewell's board of directors, through their ethics reporting platform, encrypted, timestamped, and legally tracked, and at the bottom of the report, I added, I am not seeking. Reinstatement. I am not seeking compensation, but if the board chooses to ignore this, then it's no longer a company issue, it becomes a public one. Friday, 9 a.m., Sienna sent me a screenshot, emergency audit, CEO and CFO suspended pending review, and a new name added to the top of the file. Mine. Forensic review initiated at request of Morrison. I stared at it for a long time, then closed my laptop and smiled. No email to check, no Slack pings, no fake smiles waiting at the elevator. But there was one thing, a phone call I knew was coming. At 10:22 a.m., my phone rang. Caller ID, Robert Langston, board member, lifelong executive. We'd never spoken directly until now. Elena, he began, calm but deliberate, the board has reviewed your documentation. What you've uncovered, it doesn't just affect a product. It undermines the foundation of our operations. We don't want to silence you. We want to bring you back. I didn't respond immediately because I wasn't interested in returning. Not to the same structure, not under the same rules, not with the same rot hiding beneath polished titles. A few hours later, the email came. Subject, Executive Role Proposal. Director of Clinical Ethics and Data Oversight, reporting line. Board of Directors, not CEO responsibilities. Authority over all clinical trial protocols. Ethical review and regulatory data integrity compensation. 2x former salary condition, full confidentiality. I read it. I smiled, and then I replied, Robert, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not returning to fix broken pieces. I'm returning To rebuild the system that allowed them to break in the first place. If you want me back, here are my conditions. I attached a document, 1 page, 5 points. Full veto authority over all trial data submissions, freedom to bring in independent third-party audits, retroactive access to previous 5 years of trial data, ethical clearance required before any regulatory, filing a whistleblower pipeline that reports directly to my office. Not legal, not HR. The next morning, I got a calendar invite. No subject, just an address. The top floor of Lifewell HQ. I put on a black suit I hadn't worn in years. Not for them, for me. As I entered the boardroom, all 10 members stood. I didn't. I sat. Robert cleared his throat. We've reviewed your terms, and frankly, they should have existed years ago. The board has unanimously agreed, effective immediately. You are appointed Director of Clinical Ethics and Oversight. No contracts, no red tape, just an agreement. This time the pen was in my hand. Later that evening, Sienna messaged me. They renamed the internal ethics portal. It's now called the Morrison Framework. Just thought you should know. I stared at that message for a long time. Not out of pride, out of clarity, because I hadn't come back for status. I came back for accountability. And now, the table I used to be excluded from, I was the one deciding who sat at it. 6 months later, everything looked different. The product was pulled, a new clinical approval process was launched, and every executive involved in the cover-up, gone. Lifewell was rebuilding from the ground up, and for once, they were doing it the right way. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Because the silence they relied on had finally spoken. My office isn't behind frosted glass. There's no secretary outside my door, and no gold nameplate. It's just a quiet room with one window and an open chair. Don't run meetings with buzzwords. I don't care about stock charts. What I care about is one thing. Would you give this product to someone you love? Because if the answer isn't a hard yes, it doesn't go forward. That's the table I built. And this time no one gets to flip it. But this story, this ending, it's not really an ending, because now I'm speaking to you. Have you ever been overlooked? Worked quietly while others took the credit? Pushed out because you asked too many questions? Maybe it was in a job, maybe it was in a relationship, maybe it was in your own family. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes being erased is the most powerful thing that can happen to you, if you're brave enough to come back sharper. So, now I'm asking, what would you do if your voice was dismissed? Would you stay quiet? Or would you find another way to be heard? Drop your story in the comments. You never know. Maybe someone else needs your courage to find their own. And remember, you don't have to burn bridges. Sometimes you just let them collapse under the weight of their own silence. This was Elena Morrison, not a whistleblower, not a rebel, just someone who finally chose to stop staying quiet.